Bo body, bo body.
We are live and the chat box is working. That's great. I just tested that, so that's nice to see that is actually working. So as you can see, for those of you who are jumping in again, we have spruced things up a little bit. I'm going to get into that in just a minute. We've upgraded ever so slightly. Don't get used to this aesthetic because I'm not saying this is going to stick forever, but I kind of like it for the time being, at least. The last couple of days I've been looking more into this and learning things, tricks and tips and all that good stuff, and we've kind of fleshed this out a little bit, so it's no longer just me talking to you through a camera. We're now doing it through an actual webcam with some overlays, and as you can see the chat box is over to the side there. And we've kind of got like a spruced up display. No frame for the face cam, that's next. But we're making progress. We're actually looking a little bit more professional, which I'm hoping you are going to enjoy. I'm certainly kind of impressed with it myself, although that doesn't say much because I am kind of easily impressed anyway. But yeah, welcome to the Dimed Out live stream bonus for this week. My name is Mel Foster, for those of you who don't know. And if you don't know, Dimed Out is essentially a weekly podcast which comes out every Thursday, and this is becoming a regular fixture now, doing a live stream. I've done it for about 30 minutes, but I think today may be a little bit longer. I think, in fact, going forward we may do it for an hour. That's going to be the aim, at least, if this takes off, because it gives people time to jump in, gives people time to discuss stuff, and so we're going to aim for that. We're going to aim to go from 1 till 2 every Sunday. That's 1 Central Time, 7 p.m. GMT from the British folks. I'm going to try and do an hour. And usually what we have done in the past is kind of piggybacked off a topic from the episode that has come out this week. For those of you who are jumping in completely brand spanking new, not knowing what Dined Out is, as I said, it is a weekly podcast, and we talk about all sorts of different things. The show is still kind of finding its identity and its form at the minute. We're kind of getting more of an established idea, but as a whole, whenever asked, it's about everything and anything. The mysteries and meanings of life, different ways of life, lifestyles, the way people have been going about this whole COVID thing has been a reoccurring topic. Mental health is a regular topic that comes up in the show. And just things that are fascinating and interesting. It started off as part of a personal journal, something for me to focus on doing, a project, but also an opportunity to sort of open up the window of the internet and dive into some areas I am very fascinated in and areas that I know absolutely nothing about. So it's a personal journal, it's a portal to everything and anything, and yeah, that's pretty much it. As I say, the show comes out every Thursday in audio form, the regular episodes, and you can find those on whatever podcast platform you get your podcasts from. So, official sort of housekeeping out the way. This is the more fun part, I think, or at least that's what I'm aiming for this to be. Just a weekly sort of chat with you guys. As I say, piggybacking off maybe something we've talked about in the actual episode for this week, kind of extending upon it, being a bit more relaxed. I don't have to do any editing, it's all just out there, so mistakes are mistakes, things that happen, and whatever happens, happens. But it's the joy of just kind of riffing and coming in with an idea and just seeing where it goes and what happens. It's a bit more fun, a bit more relaxed. So yeah, if you jumped in at the start, you'll have noticed we have an actual lobby, which is pretty cool now. So rather than me coming on and saying, I'm going to be about 5 minutes, give me 5 minutes to do all the gubbins and all the housekeeping I need to do beforehand, don't need to do that. Got like a little waiting room, a little lobby, which is pretty cool. Saves me a bit of time, kind of gives you guys something to do other than just watch me literally type away at a keyboard. So yeah, we're gradually making this better. We're gradually building this up. I'm learning more and more about how to do this properly, which is good. So today we are going to be talking about cryptids, because in this week's episode, the question that came up randomly, the first random question was, is Bigfoot real? And that's a question I want to pose to you guys right off the bat, that I want to see you get active within the chat. Is Bigfoot real? Do you believe that there has at least maybe been a Bigfoot in the past? Do you believe there is a Bigfoot still now? And what's your theories on it? Just want to know. That's the first question. First casual question. Second question I'm going to be throwing out your way in this bonus episode is this. If you could live in a different time period, what time period would it be and why? That's the second random question that came up in this week's regular episode. Some very interesting answers, to say the least. And yeah, I'm going to kind of get into that in a little bit myself, give my answer, which is something that I'm thinking maybe could be something that happens in the live streams, is I give my take on answers that I don't actually answer myself in the regular shows, and kind of maybe expand upon some things that come up from the random questions. But yeah, that is going to be the question for this week's live stream. The Bigfoot one's a bonus one. I do want to know about that, but that is the main question down there. If you could live in a different time period, what period would it be and why? And there are rules here. We're not talking about just dipping in and visiting. We're talking about going back and living your life through it. So if you're 24 now, what time period would you want to be 24 in? If you're 46 now, what time period would you want to be 46 in? You get the picture. So yeah, it's not dipping in, it's not just casual visits, it's a long-term commitment. What time period? If you would, you might not. You might, for all that is going on right now, all that is stressful and crazy and just a living hellscape in the here and now, you may just be like, well, you know, I like the fashion of the 60s, but they didn't have Wi-Fi, which is a perfectly valid answer. So yeah, that is the question for this week's episode. If you could live in a different time period, what time period would it be? But before we get into my take on that, we're going to dip into some cryptid stuff. So I don't know how many of you are interested even in cryptozoology, if you even actually know what cryptozoology is. It's basically it's not so much mythical creatures, but it's creatures which have not exactly been proven to exist or that are theorized to be real. Some of them are absolutely outrageous, some of them are very, very credible, some of them are somewhere in between, and we're going to be looking at a couple of those today. But not before I show you this. I saw this a little bit earlier this week and absolutely loved it. Obviously, there is the horrendous, constant fires going on in the States at the minute, which is a major, major problem, a major threat to everyone around there. But somebody showed me this, and I loved it because it just, well, you'll see why. So there you go. That is a picture, as you can see, of Bigfoot saving some forest animals from the fire to the side. Obviously, I don't think this has been done this week. This is an older picture, but it's it appealed to me. You know, we sign off the regular episodes by saying look after yourself and each other, and it's a very true sentiment, you know, especially now because of all the craziness, because of the hellscape we're living in. We need to not only look after ourselves physically, mentally, and what have you, but we also need to make sure we're looking after those around us as well. So yeah, if you take anything away from this live stream, it's be like Bigfoot. Look after yourself, get yourself out of harm's way, but make sure that others are helped as well. There you go. Really like that picture. I think I'm going to throw that up on the blog and the website, which you can find at dimed-out.com. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. We're also going to be talking a little bit about some stuff that I've been sort of consuming media-wise, I think, and that's going to be another part of this. It's going to be another arm and extension of the live streams, is just sort of being able to sit and talk about things that I've been listening to, because I'm really trying to kind of catch up with a lot of new music from this year, and just like movies that I've seen or TV stuff, which we're going to cover a little bit today. So we're going to be talking about some new music from the likes of the Soft Pink Truth, Code Orange, and weirdly enough, Taylor Swift, which does not fit with the other two, but it's always great to have an eclectic range of music. And I'm going to be talking about the Netflix series Dark as well. So if you've seen the show, which I know a lot of people have, because season 3 was pretty recently released. So yeah, if you've seen it, if you're a fan, if you bailed after the first few episodes, I want to know what your take is on Dark. I'm not going to get too much into it now, but yeah, I'm going to touch on it in a little bit, because it became somewhat of an obsession at one point that I had to limit myself in a slow burn fashion, not to binge, because it is very binge worthy. Yeah, anyway, so there you go, there's Bigfoot. I'm going to be talking about music and Dark, but for the time being we are going to be talking about, as I said, some cryptids, some slightly unusual ones. Not that there are in fact any usual cryptids, but yeah, we're going to dive into some. And I also figured out as well, as you can see, I can actually now show you things. Last week I was trying to read an article on murderabilia, and it was literally just a case of reading it, and that was no good. I didn't know how to show and share my browser. I do now, as you can see, which is pretty cool. So yeah, my Google search results are showing, as you can see, Loveland Frog, because that's the first cryptid we're going to be looking at. I know a smidge about each of these cryptids, but I did that purposely because I picked things that stood out upon first reading on like a first paragraph, and was like, okay, I'm going to hold off digging into this until the show so we can learn about these things together. But yeah, this came from an article that was basically more focused on Ohio cryptids, and the top of the list was this fella, the Loveland Frog. Alright, as you can see in Ohio folklore, the Loveland Frog, which you can see over here to the right, not entirely sure what he's doing. Obviously that's not a photo, that's an artist's impression, although it kind of looks like a clip art attempt at photoshopping. Not entirely sure what is happening there, but in Ohio folklore, the Loveland Frog, also known as the Loveland Frog Men, or Loveland Lizard, which is even trickier to say, is a legendary humanoid frog described as standing roughly 4 feet tall, allegedly spotted in Loveland, Ohio, hence where it gets its name, presumably there. Gained local renewed attention. A Loveland police officer reported to a colleague that he had seen an animal consistent with descriptions of the frogman. After a purported oh my word, just words. After a purported, is that right? Is that a word? Purported? That is an actual word. Right. Okay. Fair enough. After a purported sight, it just sounds wrong. You know what I mean? Purported. It sounds like it should be reported or perpetrated. Right. Not to be confused with porpoise. It's going to be okay. Thanks for the reassurance. After a purported sighting in 2016, by the time I've actually finished this sentence, everyone's read the paragraph already, way ahead of the story. Purported sighting in 2016, the second officer called the news station to report he had shot and killed the same creature some weeks ago after the 1972 incident. So this thing was seen in 72. Is that the only incident? Also, if you've shot and killed a 4-foot frog, then why has that not got more attention? That's what I want to know. So I talked about how some of them are kind of believable, some of them are really not. I'm not on board with the love. It's a cute idea, although actually it wouldn't be so cute in real life. If you saw a 4-foot frog humanoid, it would be absolutely terrifying. But yeah, so far I am I'm not on the side of believing in the Loveland Frog. But, you know, let's dig a little bit deeper. Let's see what else we can find. University of Cincinnati folklore professor Edgar Slotkin compared the Loveland Frog to Paul Bunyan. Oh, okay, right, yeah. Saying that stories about it have been passed down for several decades and that sighting reports seem to have come in predictable cycles. Yeah, so it's more just, it seems to be believed to be folklore than it is an actual legit cryptid that people are maybe investigating and researching. Kind of Mothman-esque, if you know your cryptids. And that's a classic, and I could have brought that up, but I wanted to go something a little bit off the known track. Let's have a look at this. Loveland Police, so this is the incident. 3rd of March, 1972 at 1 a.m. It's always after midnight, isn't it? It's always in the middle of the morning or the night. Loveland Police Officer Ray Shockey was driving on Riverside Drive near the Totes Boot Factory and Little Miami River when an unidentified animal scurried across the road in front of his vehicle. The animal was fully illuminated in his vehicle headlights, and he described it as 3 to 4 feet long and about 50 to 75 pounds with leathery skin. He reported spotting the animal crouched like a frog before it momentarily stood erect to climb over the guardrail down back towards the river. 2 weeks after the incident, the second Loveland officer, Mark Matthews. Wow, just I wish I had a separate cam to show the look on my wife's face as I just read out the term Lovelord. Loveland Police Officer Mark Matthews reported seeing unidentified animal crouched along the road. So basically same sort of incident, but he shot the animal, recovered the body and put it in his trunk to show Officer Shockey. According to Matthews, it was a large iguana about 3 to 3.5 feet long. Didn't immediately recognise it because it was missing its tail. Hang on now. It was missing its tail as in it had a tail previously? Or it was just missing a tail, like the officer just presumed, oh, this thing should have a tail. This looks like the kind of thing that would definitely have a tail. Which I'm guessing is not the assumption, because if you see a 3 to 4 foot sort of leathery frog-like reptile creature humanoid thing, you really aren't just going to be having a guess at what it should have and shouldn't have. Yeah, maybe to an extent, webbed hands, webbed feet, but really, are you just going to presume it's going to have a tail? I don't know. Anyway, where did we get to? According to Matthew, Shockey was shown the dead iguana and confirmed it was the animal he'd seen 2 weeks previously. Matthews recounted the incident to an author of a book about urban legends, but the author omitted the part that confirmed that the creature was an iguana rather than a frogman. So the cops are saying it's an iguana, and then this author has kind of spun it and referred to it as a frogman. See, a big, large iguana, absolutely. I can totally buy that. Maybe not that tall, but then again, you know, dinosaurs. So that's my logic there. But well, you can't argue with that, can you? Dinosaurs were bigger than 4 foot.
They also all died out.
Yeah.
Well,
as far as we know.
Most of them.
Aren't there conspiracies? Do you know of conspiracies that...
That's like the Loch Ness Monster, yeah.
Right, but are there people that believe there are still dinosaurs?
There are people that believe everything in the world.
This is true.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that there is, and that is in what we call the fun conspiracies box. The ones that we can kind of go, oh, that's kind of interesting, oh, that's a bit wacky, yeah. That's kind of cool. I can kind of believe that, but at the same time, probably not.
If you can think it, somebody probably believes it.
Right. All right. I will tell you what. Let's do it. Let's seeing as we've got the web browser availability, let's start sleuthing, guys. Let's have a look. Dinosaurs are still alive. All right. What we got? Well, basically, the first thing that pops up is, other than birds, there is no scientific evidence that any dinosaurs, such as Tyrannosaurus, well, obviously, are still alive.
So I'm saying birds survived,
Yeah. Alright, this is maybe another thing for another time. Maybe this is for next week.
Yeah, I do some research.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's put a pin in that for now, guys.
You're gonna find some spooky stuff. I'm pretty
Oh, I'm sure. It's the internet.
Yeah.
You know, it's full of spoopy stuff. But yeah, alright, maybe that's a theme for next week. Are dinosaurs still real? You know, I'm not asking that. That's not going to be next week's question. But, you know, let's maybe look at that a little bit for next week. Conspiracy theories about people who believe that they're still out there. That, you know, maybe they are being kept on an island or something like that. You know, as far-fetched of an idea as that would be. Anyway, so that's the Loveland Frog. In popular culture, we've got a section here on his wiki. Night fun turned into a chilling tale of horror when two teenagers playing Pokemon Go between Loveland and Lake Isabella claimed to see a giant frog near the lake on August 3rd that stood up and walked on its hind legs. So, yeah, that's the only, according to its wiki page, which we all know is not exactly the most reliable source, but it was the first thing I've came to. I'm sure there's maybe more in-depth research of the Loveland Frog Men or the big iguana of Loveland. But yeah, so one incident in 72, one incident in 2016, which just coincidentally ties in with two kids playing Pokemon Go. I say coincidentally because the idea of it, I mean, looking at that thing right there, it looks like it should be in a Pokemon Go game. But, don't know. Anyway. The second one that we've got for you on the cryptids is Grootslang, which sounds pretty badass already. Yeah. Grootslang, Afrikaans and Dutch for big snake, is a legendary cryptid that is reputed to dwell in a deep cave in the Richtersveld, South Africa. According to legend, the Grootslang is a primordial creature as old as the world itself. Tales state that gods new to the crafting of things made a terrible mistake in the Grootslang's creation and gave it tremendous strength, cunning and intellect. Realizing their mistake, the gods split the Grootslang into separate creatures and thus created the first elephants and the first snakes. So yeah, the thing that drew me to Grootslang and made me put it on the short list is the fact that its physical attributes are supposed to be that of a giant sort of sea snake, as you can see there, but with the head of an elephant, which just sounds mad. It just sounds like someone is just mixing and matching animal attributes there. I'm going to go on a limb and say that I don't think the Grootslang is, at least now, a real thing. But who knows, maybe in the past it was. I don't think if it was, it would have had a head exactly like an elephant with the big ears there and the trunk. But definitely the tusks. I can see that as being a legit attribute to the Grootslang. But not so much just like an elephant's head. I just realised I wasn't even showing you guys the picture. There you go, that would help. So there you go, there's the Grootslang. Big long sea snake there with an elephant's head. And of course this is just, as it says there, an artist's rendering. I swear I am having so much problem just getting basic words out. But there you go. Obviously not a real picture because there aren't any, but that's what it supposedly looks like. So the cave that it lives in, according to this, and by the way, we're over at cryptids.fandom.com as well, which is a good place actually to kind of dig into more cryptid stuff if you're interested in that. The cave is known as the Wonder Hole or the Bottomless Pit. Supposedly it connects to the sea, which is 40 miles away, and according to local legend, the cave is filled with diamonds. See, now this is where it's beginning to lose me a little bit, even beyond like giant sea serpent with an elephant's head. I'm vaguely on board with that because it sounds cool. Now this is just sounding like it's getting silly. A cave that is a bottomless pit filled with diamonds. Yeah. It's also said to live in warm rivers and lakes. Said to be a huge elephant-like creature with a serpent's tail. Again, it looks amazing. It looks badass. It looks like it would make for an amazing metal cover. And it is an interesting combination. Do we have any more pictures? Let's see. Let's have a quick scroll through the gallery. But yeah, I'm not... Oh, that looks terrifying. What is that? That's like an elephant with a giant squid for a face. Wow. Not exactly the most practical of creatures, but still pretty cool. I have no idea what is going on there, but we may. Oh, hold on. Waterford, Sheepman, and Sheepsquatch sightings. I'm going off on a tangent here, lads. The Waterford Sheepman is an abominable creature that terrorized the rural town of Waterford, Pennsylvania in the early 70s. It lurked in farm fields, stalking the unwitting animal in a desire to tear it apart and feed on its flesh and blood, obviously. Hundreds of people witnessed this creature. It's also referred as Goatman. Now, Goatman I have heard of. But the Waterford Sheepman, not so much. But that picture is absolutely terrifying. Sheepsquatch. Alright. Good to know. That is just... I have no idea. Just a really bad eBay seller's photo. Someone's trying to sell that, and they've got a picture of someone in there. I'm not sure. Anyway, Grootslang. Again, interesting, without a doubt. Badass, certainly. Looks cool as hell. Kind of like the elephant with the squid face thing. Is it real? Probably not. Yeah, I'm going to go on a safe guess and say probably not. But I do think there probably has been some enlarged snakes, sea serpents with tusks. I do see that as being a definite possibility. But Grootslang, I'm not so sure about, to be honest. But you never know. I have been known to be wrong on occasions. Yeah. Alright, our last cryptid is this guy. I'm going to have a crack at the pronunciation here. Dobhar-Chu. Giant carnivorous lake monster. Again, another sea beast that lives in Ireland. The most consistent ancient description is of a great otter. Wow. Other names are Dobhar-Chu, Dougaroo, sea dog, or Irish crocodile. Dobhar-Chu have been reported for a long time since ancient Ireland. That's just... I did read that right. Have been reported for a long time since ancient Ireland. Yeah, that just doesn't scare very well. Anyway, they are said to be very aggressive to humans and dogs. They were said to attack in groups of pairs. First one, Dobhar-Chu will attack. If it fails, then its companions will rush in and attack too. Kind of like a raptor mentality a little bit there. Sightings for Dobhar-Chu, modern day, are very rare or maybe even extinct, but it is said that Dobhar-Chu can still be found on Achill Island, west of County Mayo. On the island there is a lake, and anyone that has listened to the regular podcast knows I'm terrible with pronunciations, so let's just plough through this and let's get it completely wrong. Saheen's Lao, yeah, near enough. Dobhar-Chu are said to live there for now. The first modern sighting noted in a description of West Connaught of 1684 by Roderick O'Flaherty. Oh, Roderick, spotting his massive, monstrous sea otters. Another report in 2003 was made by Irish artist Sean Cochran and his wife at Dobhar-Chu in Omey Island, Connemara. He reportedly saw a giant creature with dark colouring and membranes on the feet to swim. There is, interestingly, an archaeological remain called Kinlow Stone that is the gravestone of a worm. Of a woman, even. Sorry. Hey, you laugh over there, but you try and do this on the fly. It's a gravestone. Who's making a gravestone for a worm? That's somebody with some like high-grade empathy. Yeah. It's a gravestone of a woman who was killed by a Dobhar-Chu in the 17th century. Her name was Grain. Yeah. Another gravesite is in somewhere else. Found in Cornwall graveyard. There's a Dobhar-Chu figure carved on the gravestone. So apparently, yeah, maybe one of them was killed by Dobhar-Chu. You need to look into this. Yeah. That's interesting though. I don't think I've ever come across cases where there have been gravestones and on the gravestones the cause of death has been attributed to a cryptid. There are probably cases of this all over the place, but I've never come across that before, where it's just been declared. Whether or not correctly is obviously another thing entirely, but for them to actually be like, okay, cause of death of this person was by this giant massive sea otter that actually looks absolutely terrifying. Huh. Interesting. Let's have a look if we can find some more pictures of Dobhar-Chu. Looks like we have got a gallery down here. Let me just switch you guys over. There we go. Yeah, see, it doesn't really look that intimidating there. Looks kind of goofy. That looks kind of terrifying because it does look just like a feral otter mixed with a dog that's got fur and scales. Obviously these are just, I don't want to say fan art. Just interpretations. What on earth is going on there? And why on earth is there an arm coming out of its mouth? Presumably that's just because it's eaten it off somebody, and that's like the remainders of its dinner. That's kind of a cool picture. I think that's maybe where the main one is taken from, where they've cut out around this section. Yeah, Dobhar-Chu. That doesn't look terrifying at all. That actually just looks weird. Why has it got so many fins going on there? It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, and also it looks like it's got the head of a kangaroo. Now that would be an interesting cryptid. An otter's body with a kangaroo's head. Alright, and there we go back to Waterford Sheepman. So there you go. There's just a couple of interesting cryptids that I came across in my just general research, just looking for odd cryptids that are not the usual. Oh, I see someone in the Twitch chat seems to have made their own cryptid by the looks of it. Is that a kraken there? It looks kind of like a kraken or a giant sort of squid octopus type thing. I'm not entirely sure, but it's kind of cute in that form. If it was face to face, different story.
I want to see one.
You want to see a kraken?
I would love to see one of those things.
Just-
Not safe distance, but I would love
Just any cryptid.
Mhm.
Yeah, of course.
Especially Bigfoot.
That's your go-to one.
Well,
If you could pick a cryptid, oh, that's a good question. If you could pick a cryptid to see in real life, what would it be?
I've been fascinated by Bigfoot since I was a little kid.
Yeah,
So I think,
Bigfoot's the one for you.
is Bigfoot and the skunk ape, is that the same thing?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's not, yeah.
or a variation of the same thing for sure.
I just thought it's just amazing that something has survived and reproduced and lived in some places they get, like I was talking about, like they get really cold in
Mhm.
winter. Like that's amazing to me. So I think I'd pick Bigfoot, close second, Loch Ness Monster.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See, I think Bigfoot's probably going to be, I would say, your safer option. I would not want to meet a sea-based cryptid because I feel like
I
you're
don't want to meet that Mothman thing.
just the Mothman in general. No,
Those movies, that scares me.
that's terrible. Did you see the movie?
Yes.
Yeah, it's actually kind of
It's scary.
it's kind of spooky. Yeah.
Yeah, but I would like to see Bigfoot because I feel like Bigfoot would really just want to be left alone, probably.
Well, you imagine
see
so. Yeah, you imagine like the reason why he's not been
But I want to see
basically
it with my own eyes, you know?
yeah just one time.
Yeah.
You don't. You just need to see
That's
him.
what I want for my birthday. Thank you.
It is. You just want to see Bigfoot passing by casually,
Yeah.
just strolling out.
Yeah, and I don't want to take a picture because I don't want anybody else like bothering it. I just
Right.
want to know that it exists.
You want to have that moment for you and you alone. Just that brief, unspoken moment of recognition. Do you want him to even recognise you there? Like a little nod of the head?
Mm-mm.
Like, alright.
Mm-mm. I don't want to stress it out. I just want to see it.
So you just want to be basically invisible in his habitat.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But you know and you can go home knowing.
That's what I want for my birthday.
Right, sure, I'll work on that.
Thank you.
I'll work on that. I don't know if it's going to happen, but we'll see. for sure. So yeah, there you go. There's a sub question for you for this week. Alongside, if you could live in a different time period, what would it be and why? A sub question, if you want to throw that in there, is if you could meet. Well, not even meet. If you, because that crosses a boundary. I've got Irish sea otters on my mind. If you could witness a cryptid in real life, what would it be? But yeah, there you go. Cryptids are fascinating, I think. Partly because there is the air of mystery, and because there is that sliding scale of things that are utterly ridiculous and just would never have ever existed, and then things which you can actually buy into and think, yeah, I can see that. I can see at least a variation of that. Yeah, always a fascinating topic. But yeah, we're going to move on now into the last half of the live stream. And if you were catching this after it's gone live, then these do happen every Sunday, or they're going to. That's the plan, hopefully, or at least most Sundays, 1 p.m. Central to 2, and that is 7 p.m. to 8 GMT. But yeah, you can also subscribe to all the stuff. Just check in the description box and whatever, and do that in your own time, your own leisure. Alright, so I did talk a little bit briefly at the top of the show about the Netflix show Dark, which I've just finished, and would love to get your take on. So whether you are watching live or you are watching as a pre-recorded video, would love to know what your take on Dark is. I really enjoyed it. I was really invested for the first season and the second season. Admittedly, the third did sort of reel out a little bit and kind of lose its footing in a couple of episodes and places. Kind of pulled it back together a little bit at the end. I'm just going to say there's going to be no spoilers here, so if you haven't seen it, it's okay. And that goes for anyone who wants to comment about it. Try and keep it as spoiler free for anyone that is thinking of watching it. If it's on their watch list, maybe they've never heard of it and they're planning to based on this, I don't know. But yeah, let's try and keep it spoiler free. Yeah, it kind of unraveled a little bit in the third season, but not too much that it knocked me off. It kind of slowed the momentum of me watching an episode every day down a little bit, because it wasn't quite as gripping, and I wasn't quite as invested in the third season because of some of the directions they took. But as a whole, I really liked it. I think it was really smart. It was very cerebral in places, very dark, as the title suggests, but also hopeful and optimistic. And there was this constant sort of flip-flopping between two very overdone points in any sort of fiction, between good and evil, light and dark, or Licht and Shadow. What? Just flexing a little bit of German? In a really bad German? Licht und Shadow.
Shadow a German word? I don't think it is.
I don't know.
Alexa, what is the German word for
Don't
shadow?
cheat.
Chateau in German is Schloss.
No, that just means castle.
Yeah, it was. She thought you said chateau, as in.
Alexa, what's the German word for shadow?
Shadow in German is Schatten.
Schatten. Licht und Schatten.
Schatten.
Nice.
Yeah.
Anyway, but it does a really good job of not just sort of playing the two opposite ends off of each other, but finding melting and merging points, and looking at the spectrum, looking at the idea that not everything is figured and fixated on dualism of 2 points, that there is a sort of an ethereal merge between them, and that sometimes they just get blurred beyond recognition. I also really like the fact that it really kind of latches on to the idea of good things, good motivations, good reasons for doing things, just corrupting people sometimes because of the conviction and the sort of necessity and the desperation behind them. Again, not getting into spoilerific territories, but there are a lot of bad things that happen, but for good reasons, and you don't realise them at the time. You see them as bad things, but as it sort of reverse engineers itself somewhat, you get to see that the intentions to begin with were pure and of good heart, but just become warped and mutated over time because of the fixation on it, and because of the sort of hell-bent dedication to pursue these ideas. But I thought it was really, really good as a whole. Very smart, as I say, very sort of atmospheric. A lot of great twists, some great acting. If you're going to watch it, if you haven't seen it yet, I would recommend that you configure your audio settings, because I believe as a standard it comes with the English dubs over the top, which may be your preference. If it is, then hey, you've got that sorted already right from the get-go. But I honestly found Dark to be a lot more enjoyable hearing it in its native language. And yes, you do have to concentrate on everything to catch even the most fleeting bit of dialogue. And that's the thing with this show, it's not a casual watch because of the very sort of tangled nature and the way that it deals with the science fiction in it, and a lot of the sort of religious allegories, and just the narrative, and the fact that there are so many characters and so many pinpoints and different things happening. You kind of need to have your full concentration. But if you're going to jump into it, which I do highly recommend, I would suggest configuring the audio so it is in its native German spoken language with English subs. But again, it's completely your preference. I know some people prefer dubs over subs, and we're not going to make any comments on those, Not for me. Never has been, but hey, if that's how it works and that's what gets you into foreign language drama, foreign language art, then so be it. Go with what works for you. But yeah, give it a try. Try it in the German. See what happens. See if it switches your opinion, if you are a dub person. Anyway, so yeah, Netflix and Dark, definitely worth recommending. I also mentioned at the top of the show, we're going to be talking about a little bit of new music that I've been listening to, trying to kind of dig my way into some new records from 2020. Got a backlog going that I am gradually working through. Off the top of my head, without going into too much detail, I listened to the new Disclosure album. A little bit disappointed, was hoping for a bit more. The album's called Energy, and it starts with plenty of it. First 3 tracks are great, and there are definite highlights dotted throughout. But yeah, it's a little bit inconsistent for my liking, and just a bit disappointing. As is the case with the Fortet album that he released earlier this year called 16 Oceans. As a general being, I like a lot of Fortet's work. This just really didn't do much for me at all. There are highlights, there are good spots here and there, some good use of texture and space. I like what he's doing as a whole with his whole sort of ambient influx with his work of recent times. But yeah, this thing just, it doesn't really hold together that well. The ending is a nice finish, but it kind of feels like there's not much of note before you get to those last 3 tracks. So yeah, a little bit disappointed in those too. But 3 albums that I haven't been disappointed in, 3 albums that I actually did not expect anything from, because they're relatively, or definitely in some cases, new to me. Definitely new to me is this, the Soft Pink Truth's new album. Let me see if I can remember the actual title. Shall We Continue Sinning So That Grace May Pursue? It's something like that. It's a long, lengthy, wordy title, and it's a journey. It's not an album for casual listeners, I guess. It's not an album for everybody because it is quite divisive in its approach. It's a strange amalgam of minimal house, which I believe is what Soft Pink Truth started off as. This is the first album I've listened to from Soft Pink Truth, but there's a touch of minimal house with some sort of downplayed electronica, some ambience, a lot of strange textured layered sounds in there, and Baroque instrumentation, woodwind, string instruments you wouldn't expect to be thrown in there, almost Gregorian vocals that kind of drift in and out. It's very dreamy. It goes some very strange places, but as a whole, yeah, it's a pretty fantastic record. One that, as I said, I didn't know what to expect because it's my first experience with this artist. But yeah, definitely would recommend that new Soft Pink Truth album. Shall We Go On Sinning So That Grace May something. I always forget the last word, but it's enough for you to dig into if you're interested. The second album I'm going to be talking about right now is this by Code Orange. The album, not the track, the album is called Underneath. I have heard of Code Orange before, but I haven't actually listened to any of their material until this album, which I'd seen get quite a good bit of recognition and solid reviews. So I thought I would try it. And this thing is something. Still kind of figuring out what. It's almost like, and I did see it described in passing through a review as being like a horror movie come to life, and I guess that is a fair assessment. It's basically a mix of industrial metal, I guess, as a base, but I guess there's metalcore in there and other just a whole bunch of interesting stuff. A lot of industrial decay, a lot of glitch, atmosphere, and just intensity going on throughout this record. At times it is absolutely dense. It's like a brick that is swinging towards your head at points, but it's also melodic in places as well, really strangely, beautifully melodic in spots. So yeah, there is a lot going on with this record, but I'm liking it from what I've heard of the couple of run-throughs I've been through. So yeah, Code Orange with Underneath. And the last record that I'm going to just sort of talk about briefly before we end for this week is the new one from Taylor Swift. So we've gone from sort of abstract, almost existential ambience to industrial metal to Taylor Swift. This is not an album I thought I would have enjoyed because I've not really cared for Taylor Swift's output in the past. From what I've heard, I'm not really into that brand of pop music. But I was recommended this by somebody whose opinion I trust very much so, especially when it comes to music. He says you need to listen to it. It's got your man from The National doing some work on it. I'm a huge National fan, so I was like, oh, okay, I'll try it. Especially after he's mentioned that and after he recommended it, Mr. Johnny Singh. And I listened to this thing and was really pleasantly surprised by it. You can hear Aaron from The National's fingerprints all over the sort of compositions. A lot of the compositions, not all of them, but you can definitely sort of hear certain signatures and thematic ideas that have popped up in the last couple of National albums, and you can kind of hear his influence and his work in this record. But also, I just like the way it's spaced out. I like the compositions as a whole. I like the songwriting from a third-person perspective, telling stories that aren't from her viewpoint. Because for me, Taylor Swift's always been somebody that has two types of records, and that's I'm in love with somebody, or I'm no longer in love with somebody, and I'm upset about it, or I'm mad about it. And that's, for me, basically from what I've heard, her back catalogue seems to have fallen into. This actually kind of runs a much broader gamut and feels more robust in the songwriting. And I think the sort of indie folk, indie sort of down-tempo stylings of the album actually really suit her really well. Really emphasises her vocals and, as I said, her songwriting. So yeah, I'm somewhat of a converted fan for this album, at least. If she keeps this up and kind of keeps exploring this sort of artistic direction, I'll definitely check out more stuff. But yeah, very interesting and unexpected arrival in my listening pile of late. So yeah, 3 very different albums, but 3 albums that I would recommend highly for very different reasons. So yeah, I want to know what you've been listening to. What have you been checking out? Something new? Have you gone back to something that you really loved? Have you finally got around to listening to that classic album that everybody has heard, everybody knows you should listen to, and maybe you've said that you've listened to and loved in the past, but you haven't ever actually listened to it, but now you have? Is that what's been going on? I don't know. You tell me. What have you been listening to, and what future album releases are you looking forward to? New album from the Doves came out this past Friday. I'm looking forward to jumping into that. Their first album in, it is 10 years, I think. A long time, anyway. Yeah, liking what I've heard in terms of the singles from that. Really like the new, I always never know how to pronounce her name, SZA Scissor. the new single she put out this week, hit different, like that a lot. In a couple of weeks, got a new album from Deftones, Idols, Roisin Murphy, and Keaton Henson. So all, I think, on the same week, or within the same weeks, round about the same time. But a lot of new stuff coming out too, so that's one of the reasons why I'm trying to dig into the back catalogue of this year. Anyway, let me know what you were listening to, what you were looking forward to as well. Also, what have you been watching? We talked briefly a little bit last week about I'm thinking of ending things. Have you got around to watching it? If so, what did you think of it? Have you actually been out to cinemas as well? That's another question I want to throw out to people. Have you braved it? If so, what was your experience like? What did you see? I want to know. This inquiring mind wants to know. Other than that, that's going to be it for this week's live stream, guys. Really enjoy putting these together. If you haven't checked out this week's episode, please do. It is episode 17. It features our first married couple on the show, and we are talking about, as we've mentioned here, Bigfoot, but we're also talking about the question that I posed at the bottom, which of course I still want you to answer in the comments. If you could live in a different time period, what would it be and why? That comes up in this week's episode. But the main crux of this week's episode is talking to my guests about living on the Isle of Man, which has been COVID-free since May, and what that has been like. So yeah, it's a state that we all are looking forward to getting to at some point. Fortunately for those guys, they have been there, and yeah, we're talking about how they got there, what preventative measures were taken, what life is like now that they're past it. And yeah, it's definitely something that makes for interesting listening, so go check that out. As I said at the top of the show, it is available wherever you get your podcasts from, so go subscribe if you haven't done so already, and yeah, give us a rating and a review as well if you want to be so kind to help out the show. Same here, if you haven't yet subscribed to the various platforms, that's Twitch and YouTube and what have you, then do so, because we're going to be doing these, as I mentioned, pretty much on the reg each Sunday. So yeah, that's the best way to make sure you don't miss out on anything. For everything else, head on over to the website, and it's dimed-out.com. You can find links to everything there, and you can just navigate that at your own time and leisure. But other than that, thank you for tuning in, whether it has been live or if it is after the fact. It is very much appreciated. Until next week, guys, thank you for watching, and look after yourselves and each other.